right up front here.
Oh, okay. Okay, so hi, my name is Liz. So Dr. Wechsler from the USDA writes that based on survey data, HT soybeans went from 17% of US soybeans acreage to 68% in 2001 and to 94 in 2014 and 2015. So HT soybeans are herbicide resistant, and they're one of the many crops that we have now available in the market. So as you can see, they're becoming in the last few years, they're becoming really common. So you're going to be hearing a lot of pros and cons about this topic. So tonight I will be arguing that genetically modified crops are agriculturally useful. First, genetic engineering mitigates the negative impact of agricultural pollution. It reduces the need for herbicides, and it also benefits the farmers by reducing the amount of chemicals they're exposed to during the process of production. Second, genetic modifications lower the cost of production by making the crops more disease resistant, and they also facilitate their distribution. And last but not least, GM crops can create a sustainable pathway to feeding the world by with the high yields they are producing, and they also have the ability to create more nutrient-dense foods. So since my claim is specifically pertaining to agriculture, I want to use the definition of agriculture as the practice of growing crops for food, economic gain, or other human needs. The other term that I want to specify or define is gene, which is a segment of DNA that's responsible for the transmission and expression of one trait, or in some cases more than one trait. And GM crops, or transgenic crops, which I will be using interchangeably, are plants that have been modified in a way that doesn't occur naturally, and the introduction of a gene that comes from a different organism and can code for a specific trait that the farmer might want to include in that crop. So my first claim is that genetic engineering diminishes the effects of agricultural pollution. In 2002, the National Quality Inventory Report to U.S. Congress, the states reported that agricultural pollution is the leading cause of river and stream impairment, which means pollution. And it's also the second leading cause of pollution in lakes, ponds, and any other bodies of water, which can make their way into the water that we're drinking. So GM crops can reduce this pollution by, in some cases, some bacterial genes that have been inserted into the crops are able to decrease the amount of herbicides that are used. According to the International Service for Acquisition and Agri-Biotech Applications, glyphosate and glufosinate-resistant corn reduce the herbicide use in corn production by 18.5 million pounds. So glyphosate and glufosinate are herbicides that they kill a really wide range of weeds, so that by making the crops resistant to those two herbicides, that's reducing the need for other herbicides that are only specific to one type of weed, and that as a result of that, you get a lower amount of herbicide use that's in total. So you just have that one or two herbicides. They're going to kill everything as opposed to having many specifically for just one type of weed. Another effect of pollution is the negative impact it has on the health of the farmers. So the health of the farmers benefits from the improved working conditions resulting from that same reduction in the use of herbicide. My second claim is that the genetic modifications lower the cost of production. So transgenic crops are more resistant to disease. So that means that the farmers are using less equipment and less insecticides and bug solutions. So they're spending less money. On an article by the U.S. News and World Report, a farm owner states that this technology allows him to produce more product with less expense. Some traits acquired through genetic modifications increase the shelf life of crops. So if the farmer is paying less for the production, that means that we're going to see a change in the prices of the crop itself and the products that come from that crop. So that's something that as consumers we should be concerned about. And finally, my third claim is that GM crops can create a sustainable pathway to feed the world. According to the U.S. definition, a sustainable agriculture should be one that satisfies human need for food and fiber, enhances environmental quality, and makes the most efficient use of non-renewable resources. It also sustains the economic viability of farm operations and enhances the quality of life for farmers and society as a whole. So one example is that yields of corn are being higher. So the mass production of corn can alleviate the problems that we have, not being able to feed the growing population problems that we have. And if countries they don't have to pay as much for growing those crops and helping out developing countries, they're more likely to do it if it's not going to cost as much money. In addition, changes from genetic changes can enhance nutritional value. Two ag experts say that golden rice can increase vitamin A intake and reduce child blindness. Vitamin A deficiency is very common, and that's something the GM crops can easily solve. And in conclusion, genetically modified crops are agriculturally useful because they diminish the effects of pollution, they lower the cost of production, and they can also create a pathway to a sustainable way to feed the world. And that's it. I can sit down now, right?
What's
I
that?
don't have to stay here for your.
No, you don't. Like I said, you feel like you're being targeted if you stand up there. All right, Liz, there are several things in the speech that are really nice. I thought that you started off with a quote that had a statistic there to show that the topic is significant. The proposition is very clearly identified. You had an excellent layout of what the preview was and where you were going in the argument, so I thought you did great on that. And I think we got a good idea about the notion that there's going to be controversy about this because it's an increasing event that's going to go on, and there's always criticism of those sorts of things. I do think you could maybe suggest and tell us what some of the things are that people say, or that there are movements, for instance, that, you know, where people are objecting to the use of these products or fear-mongering about that sort of thing, to maybe build that argument up a little bit more. The structure of the speech is very clear to follow internally also. You did an excellent job transitioning between the points, so I knew where we were at any given point. Your claims are clearly stated, and they are claims in the body of the speech, so that's all pretty solid. The proof, I think, is a little bit thinner than it needs to be. You had one example on the third point concerning corn, but it's a very vague example. You had another example on the first point concerning the decreased amount, and some factual data on it, the decreased amounts of different kinds of pesticides that are being used. And I thought that was probably the clearest piece of evidence that you had on that argument. I think we need to be able to see what the change in yields are, what the change in costs are going to be. You do have a quote from a farmer in that middle point that basically says, you know, it's going to be less expensive to do these kinds of things, and we've got additional shelf life. And I'm not exactly sure how significant those cost reductions are. I mean, how much are we actually saving in the long run, and how much is that going to benefit the farm industry or anybody else for that matter? I think you need to have some stronger evidence on those particular points. You did a nice job explaining your arguments. Oh, there was one thing that I thought that was a little bit problematic in the preview that I'm going to mention. I think you start giving your explanations of the supporting points in the preview, and you should save those explanations for when you get to the body of the speech. So, you know, stick to the claim in the preview so we know where you're headed, and then give the explanation when you get to that point, because otherwise it sounds a little bit redundant. I've heard some of this before, and I think that would be a bit easier. And you did a very nice job speaking to the audience. Thank you.